everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today's card is created from scratch and it's done digitally. So I'm going to show you the process that I did to create this card. So to do this card, I used my iPad Pro and my Apple Pencil, and I'm using the app ProCreate, which is an art app that you can get for the iPad. It's pretty powerful. So I wanted to create a Foghorn Leghorn card for my grandfather for his birthday because he is a big Looney Tunes fan and Foghorn Leghorn is his favorite character. He's pretty funny. So I found some photos online, some reference photos of different poses, head poses, and then body poses I liked. And so I picked a couple and I kind of amalgamated them together and decided to sketch them out for the card. So I have this in ProCreate right now and I'm sketching this out. I'm using the HB brush, which emulates a pencil, and I chose blue just because it reminded me of a non-repro blue pencil which I used for sketching before, and so that's what I used to do a rough outline. Once I have my guides down with that rough outline, I'm going to come back with a brush and do my final strokes, but I'm just laying out my card at this point. So I'm working out some text options here, some different font styles, trying to see what I like. I'm not as good at lettering as I'd like to be, so I kind of struggled with this, and I don't normally use my iPad Pro for lettering either, so I had a bit of a learning curve with this, but I did end up finding something that I was happy with. So I did the main word mark using a brush that I picked up off of iPad Lettering. I believe it's iPadlettering.com. I'll put the link in the description below to her website. I picked up a brush called Gracie that I used for that, and then I just used a standard gel pen brush that's available in the ProCreate app for the It's Your Birthday portion. Once I had this done, I printed it out on my printer using Nina Solar White cardstock, and I have just a general inkjet printer. I use an Epson, and so I printed out a card with outlines, and so I have this ready to go, and it's on the cardstock that I need to color it with Copics, which is perfect. So I'm just drawing out some horizon lines here in the background. So I want my object, or in this case Foghorn, I want him to be the focal point, and so I'm going to put the background behind him, but I'm going to put him breaking out of the frame so he feels more front and center, not just coloring the entire background. So I've put down some pencil marks in the background of him where I want the edges of my background to be, and then I'm coming in with a kneadable eraser to pick up some of the graphite. I like using kneadable erasers because you can just spot collect graphite, and it takes a bit of the graphite away but not all of it, so you can still see the lines. So I really like that. Now I'm ready to color my Foghorn Leghorn, and I'm going to use Copic Markers for him, and this is pretty basic. I wanted to keep him very cartoony and very blocky, not blended colors at all, just hard edge colors, hard edge shadows, that sort of idea. So I'll put all of the colors that I used in the description below, so you can check out any colors if you're curious about any that you see here. One thing I wanted to mention, going back to the ProCreate app, is when I did the outline when I did the word mark for the card, I used that Gracie brush, and I also used the Gracie brush to do the outline of Foghorn Leghorn. The nice thing about that is when I use the Apple Pencil, if I give pressure on the pencil onto the iPad, it makes thicker strokes. And then if I lift up the pressure a little bit and draw lighter lines, it'll make thinner strokes. So it gives that brushstroke look, and it looks really cool in this setting. And the nice thing about the iPad, especially with ProCreate, is it'll smooth out your lines. So if you don't draw a really straight line, it will curve out the jiggy edges. If you have any little ripples or something in your drawing, it'll make them smooth, so it looks like a nice flow brush mark. So that I really like. That brush is amazing, and so I will link it, as I mentioned, in the description below, so you can check it out. Now, when I got to this point, I realized I forgot to put a tail on my Foghorn Leghorn, so I kind of went in and just drew something with a pencil and then went over it with my Micron pen. And so in this instance, I had to emulate the strokes, the thicks and thins of that Gracie brush. So I just kind of thought where I'd probably add pressure with my iPad pencil and added an extra line and colored that in with my Micron pen. Now the great thing is that it's black ink, and Micron pens are great because they have a really rich black. They're not like kind of a light in-between black. I find that Faber-Castell isn't a true rich black, but the Microns are, so it matched with the printout and you couldn't tell the difference when it was done. So I'm just erasing my lines. The eraser I'm using here, that green one, is actually a dustless eraser, and it's made by Faber-Castell. And so I like it because it doesn't leave a bunch of shavings on your desk or anything. So for coloring this, I did have to pull the back cap off my Copic. It was starting to blot up on the one end, and I didn't want a big drip of marker to end up on my art because the marker is pretty full. So I find that when you pull the caps off both ends, then it kind of distributes the pressure, and you don't get the blots of ink coming out of the marker if it's too full. So I'm just getting this guy colored up, and as I mentioned, I used just flat colors. I didn't blend anything. And so for the tail, instead of trying to create shadows with hard edges, I really wanted to keep that kind of cartoon essence. So I just made some squiggly lines with the shadow color in between the tail fluff, I guess. Just wavy lines randomly. No real reason for putting them down, just spreading them out where I felt that they would look best. And the colors I chose I tried to use colors that were really bold and bright, kind of like a cartoon, just to keep that kind of look and feel. So you can see here that I'm just getting everything colored in, and I only used 2 colors for each section. So if I was coloring a red, I only had one darker red for the shadow. And in this case, I'm coloring the yellow of the feet. And so I only have one darker yellow for the shadow. I did not use a lot of colors, not too many combinations. I really did want to keep this simple and bright and fun too. And I have to say, it's actually kind of nice being able to create something with my iPad because I can have a vision, and if I can't find what I'm looking for, I can create it and then just print it out on my printer at home. And having the Nina Solar White cardstock, it prints amazing on the paper. I just made sure that my settings on my printer were of a photo quality, and it seemed to take the ink really well. And so it gave me a nice output that I could color with, and I didn't have to wait too long. There wasn't any smudging. I didn't have to wait for the ink to dry from the printer, and the Copics didn't make the ink from my printer bleed at all, which was nice. And so this is my first time doing that, and I was really happy with the results. So I can see myself doing this again in the future, just especially if I have a concept or something in my head, or like in this case of just a proper character that I know specifically what I want. It's really nice to just be able to create that with my iPad and print it out on my printer, and I'm ready to go, which is really great. The nice thing about the ProCreate app as well is you can choose the size of brush you use. So you pick your style and it has its attributes, and then you can switch your brush size. So I was able to get a custom line for the outline of my Foghorn Leghorn. And then for doing the lettering, I wanted something that was a heavier brush and had thicker strokes overall. So for the boy word in the word mark, I have a thicker stroke, and it was really nice to have that flexibility to create something heavier. Whereas if I was doing this in real life, then I may have only one brush that I can work with, and I have to make that be flexible for both applications. And so this way with the ProCreate app, if you don't like something, you can erase it and do it again, or you can make your brush bigger and get more of a dramatic stroke for different areas. And it's a nice contrast too, which is pretty awesome. So now I'm just coloring in my background, and you'll notice that I am blocking that out behind Foghorn Leghorn, but keeping it not to the edges, because I do want him to feel like he's really the front and center of the card. He's coming out of the scene, and he's more in the foreground. Then kind of the background is just an afterthought, just to add a little bit of color to the card, but not the full card. So I'm just coloring with my Copics, and I found that with these Copics that I'm using in the background, they're getting pretty low, so I'm going to have to order some refills. These are two of my favorite colors, so I do have those on my list now, and I will have to put in an order soon. But I am getting this colored up, and I didn't add a lot of detail to the background either. I wanted to keep it very simple and basic. Again, just keeping Foghorn Leghorn as the focal point. So you can see also for the shadows on him, I kind of imagined that the sun was coming from the right side, maybe not maybe a little bit upper right, but not too high. And for him, especially for the white part, I used a brown color, which I will get the color here. It is Ash Rose, which is E70. So for the shadows on the white, I didn't color in the white at all. I wanted to keep that white, but I find E70 as a Copic color is really great for creating shadows on white. I really like the effect that it gives. And so that's what I used for his main body shadows. And so I did keep really hard edges, as I mentioned. I just love that look, and I think it really lended to kind of the cartoon flavor overall really well. So now I have my background colored in, and I'm just adding some tufts of grass. I imagine that he's probably on the farm somewhere in the barnyard, or maybe he's just roaming around and there's just kind of worn grass because of all the animals that are walking around and stuff. So you got these random little tufts of grass. So I'm just adding little scribbles, and then I come in with a darker green just to give a little bit of dimension to each of those after I've done a tuft of each. So nothing fancy, nothing too complicated, just a few little brush marks, flick of the wrist, and those are in. As a last item, I wanted to bring in a shadow just to ground him to the scene, so that he didn't feel like he was floating in space. Sometimes it's easy to forget those grounding shadows, but they're super important and they make such a difference to your card. So having those shadows around his feet were really important to include. Now I have this colored, I'm ready to cut it up and get it all trimmed up to fold and make a card out of. So I'm using my Martha Stewart paper folder. This is the large one, so you can also create envelopes with this tool. I love this tool, it's so awesome. And for this, I'm going to use the bone folder and score the card for folding. So I have a line for the center. I made sure that that was in my printout so I could know where that needs to be. Now, as you can see, I didn't cut the right side off of the card. I wanted to make sure that the edges met up. And so, I mean, the Martha Stewart tool is really great and it is very even, but there's always that chance where it just folds a little crooked, and I didn't want to have to redo this. So I just left them and trimmed them at the end. Now I found that my Copic markers were showing through the Nina cardstock, and so I wanted to put a liner in my card. So I cut a piece of yellow paper and found the center to score it the same as I did my card, and I left that ragged edge that I could cut off later to match the edge of my card. So the trick to doing a liner is to only glue one side or only adhere it to one side of the inside of your card. If you do both sides and then you try to open your card, or you do the reverse, you try to close your card, it'll buckle because it needs more space. The paper needs more space to open and lay flat, and then when it closes up, it requires less space, and so it'll bend your paper if you have too much. So as you can see, I've only put tape on the left side to hide the marker. And then I have this pretty yellow insert in my card too as a liner, and it kind of worked out. It was a win-win, even though I was kind of covering up something else. So I have all the edges, and I'm trimming that with my ruler, and so now they're flush, which is awesome. And so there's a look at the card. So it's all done. This was mostly a coloring card. I had so much fun drawing this on my iPad too. It was kind of therapeutic. So I'm going to make this available in my Etsy shop. I'm going to make two versions available. You can purchase either the digital version that's uncolored, and you can print that out on cardstock if you'd like, or I also have a colored version. So if you just want the card printed out, cut it up, and it's ready to go, I have that version on my Etsy shop as well, and I'll put both of those linked in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different, but it's still a card making version, I guess, or a different way to do cards. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos. Thank you so much for watching.